Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. And it's Daniel Hussey here, as always, joined by my brother Sean. Sean, how's it going?
All good, how are you?
Look, keeping well, keeping well. How was the sporting weekend for you now? What did you get to watch in the end?
Well, I got a good amount of the Kerry Tyrone game. Obviously, that was one of the big sporting shocks of the weekend, and I think judging by a lot of people, I think even when we talked probably on this podcast 2 or 3 months ago, when we talked to the potential of a Dublin Kerry All Ireland final, and everything was planned around that, I think a couple of spanners have been thrown in the works in that regard. So it was an interesting, I suppose, couple of hours in the end with how long was a bit of a pet hate of mine, but how long was the break between full time and the start of extra time? I thought was just
10 minutes,
unbelievable how
isn't it?
long
It's
that
it's
was.
it's it's because
Well,
it's like starting a new game, and we're used to football. But yeah, I agree with you.
no, but I think I'd say if you got the clock out, I'd say it could have been well longer than 10 minutes because it just felt for whatever reason that it was extra long. Um, but full credit to Tyrone and everything that they've overcame. I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. And the Premier League, I suppose the weekend didn't start well for us Arsenal fans. At about quarter to one on Saturday afternoon when you knew the game was over.
Well, that's it. And on the Premier League, you watch City Arsenal. You obviously we watched Wolves United together. Did you watch? Did you get anything else in, or how was it? Did you catch the highlights, or how did you? Do you always kind of try and get a few games in, or what? What was the kind of
Yeah,
tactic?
well, I kind of find it hard during the summer when there's things to be doing and the weather's a lot better. So I didn't get a lot of the majority of the Liverpool Chelsea game. But I obviously saw the clips. I think with at the moment at the Premier League, it's I suppose it's probably not a damn squid, but you're kind of waiting for a couple of weeks' time when all the big hitters get into gear. Ronaldo gets going with United. You've got maybe De Bruyne and Grealish playing together with Chelsea. You're still waiting to find out what is the best, front two or three behind Lukaku. So there is still that element of, you know, jostling for position. And albeit there has been some big games and some games between the top sides, we feel like, we're just waiting for something to kick off. And I think a lot of people thought the Liverpool Chelsea game would give that. Not too sure it did. Yeah. So I think we're just waiting for something to happen, and like everything, I think it'll be happening soon.
Yeah, well, we covered international football towards the end of the week, but I think most people I was expecting after 4 games for the international windows, there was a bit of a nightmare there. But look, Cristiano Ronaldo transfer. What do you make of it first of all, and then how do you see him fitting into this Manchester United team, and does it push them on to be proper title contenders this year?
Well, I'll be honest, I got blindsided by the whole thing. Absolutely blindsided. I saw the reported interest for Man City, and I was kind of thinking in my head, going, how's it going to work? Are we just going to see total dominance from Man City again this season? I'm ultimately thinking ahead to that first game when Ronaldo goes back to Old Trafford, and I actually never really saw why aren't United signing him, and it just never felt like it was coming. Obviously, Kane was the big rumor that it could be a tug of war between potentially City and United, albeit the United interest had wavered, and it does feel like an opportunistic signing by Man United, by the Glazers, and the people running United, and they have taken. I think it'll work out a pretty good sign, and you get the fans on board straight away. You've got someone who is world class and someone for the likes of Greenwood, who we have behind us there, and for people watching on the stream. I mean, he started the season with 3 goals from 3 games with all the big money signings that they've had. You do feel like someone like him has gone up a gear. So it's a pretty interesting. It was a pretty interesting 48 hours, 72 hours with how it all flipped and how quick United came in from and him signing. I think it's a good signing for them. I don't think they had probably the interest nor maybe the facilities to go out and buy a Harry Kane or a Haaland. And I think next best you want someone who's guaranteed probably 15, 20 goals in the league at least. And you're getting someone at Ronaldo at 36. I mean, it's an interesting, I suppose, experiment. If he comes and shines this year in the Premier League and gets United back up there, I mean, you really have to doff your cap to him. But I think it's going to be an interesting few weeks, but I think it's a positive move for Manchester United. I think it's probably what they needed.
Yeah, you can't like underestimate the boost it gives the fans. And I know Jamie Redknapp kind of called out Gary Neville with the Glazers, that sort of thing, but that was kind of dominating the headlines, maybe a few months ago with the Super League, and now all everyone's talking about is the return of Ronaldo. But looking at a Manchester United best 11 here, Sean, like in a Manchester United best 11, Ronaldo, Bruno, Sancho, Pogba have to start, don't they? Whether Pogba is not one of the four, but maybe in centre mid, but based on the price tags, obviously, particularly Ronaldo and Sancho, but obviously Bruno from last season. So, like, I know you mentioned that Greenwood will learn a lot from Ronaldo, but he started the season so well. Obviously, there's going to be like side effects to Ronaldo coming on, like, or Ronaldo starting ahead of Greenwood in those games. Is there a case for that maybe, it might, like, Rashford, Greenwood might not be getting the game time necessary? Or do you think overall that's like, it is going to be a net positive for United based on the amount of games they have, obviously, with the Champions League as well?
Well, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that Solskjaer doesn't really know his best 11. And at times last year, when you have a settled squad, and when they went on that really good run of form, and they got to the top of the league at one stage, they really did have a settled team and a settled system. And at the moment now, you're not sure if he trusts Varane and Maguire to maybe play at one holding midfielder as opposed to two. If he doesn't, does Pogba start? You could be looking at a side with Martial, Greenwood, Sancho maybe on the bench. If you play Pogba, you play two midfield, you play Pogba, Bruno, Rashford, Ronaldo. So there's a huge amount of opportunities, and I do think it's a massive year for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, particularly with what happened in the Villarreal in the Europa League final. So he's got a real opportunity here. He's got everything you'd want in a squad. If you look down through the list, I don't think there's anything really missing. Potentially a centre midfielder away. If Nemanja Matic was 4 or 5 years younger, or there was someone coming through, I just don't think Scott McTominay's got the ability maybe to play in there on his own. And if he does, it's going to take him a few years to learn that role. But if you're a Manchester United fan, where you were 2 years ago, it does feel like not a meteoric rise, but it does feel like a rapid increase, a rapid turn in fortunes. So there's a lot to be positive about Manchester United at the moment. I think if you're them, you just want to see the next 2 or 3 months before Christmas, what can they do? They're going to be in the Champions League. They're going to be playing the Premier League as well. So that's when you need your big squad, and that's what Manchester United have. And yeah, I think the immediate future is bright. Whether at the end of the season they'll be lifting anything, I think that'll be to come.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're not a settled team, and I agree with you there. But I suppose on the back five side of things, they do have Varane, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, Shaw, David De Gea. And David De Gea started the season can't be underestimated as well, because that would have been a battle throughout the season where, I don't know, I know we're 3 games in, it kind of seems that De Gea's got there, which doesn't bode well for my draft, by the way, because I have Dean Henderson, but I also have Bernd Leno, which could potentially both be number 2s, maybe, come the second half of the season. But in a briefly on United before we move on to Arsenal, is that a title challenging squad they have then for you? I know you actually said before Ronaldo signed that they'd be Champions League potentials, and I kind of agreed with you, and then I looked at who else was in the Champions League, like PSG, Man City, and I said no chance. But with Ronaldo now, who, let's be honest with you, I know he'd probably go for a Champions League over a Premier League, where the United fans might go for the Premier League. Is there a Premier League in this team, or is there a Champions League in this team, or what's your kind of, like, if you had to make a call? It's tough, I know, because I'm struggling to get the starting 11 here written out.
No, I do. Yeah, like I just tried to write it down as well. I think they're a Champions League team awaiting. The key thing is luck. You've got to get a lucky draw. You've got to, avoid some of the big guns and hope some of the others take each other out. I think the pressure is ultimately going to be on PSG and Man City this year, and I think someone again will just crawl through the net and hopefully get a good side of the draw. Because let's remember, Chelsea got a brilliant side of the draw. They got a good run of it. I think they played the likes of Sevilla. They played Atletico Madrid, which is a tough tie. Porto, and then obviously had to play City in the final. I just can't remember who they played in the semi-final, but they definitely did get the better end of it, missing PSG. Playing City in the final. So I think if you're Manchester United, I definitely think you're probably not targeting the Champions League, but really thinking you can give it a good crack. And for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, looking at Jurgen Klopp's transformation, them winning the Champions League. I think in one of his earlier years they got to Europa League final, Champions League final. So if you're Solskjaer, you're hoping that there's a similar path there for you. But I definitely think they need to win something. I thought they had to win something last year to kind of validate what they've been doing. But it's a really, really strong squad, and it's a really good team to watch. United. I do think they're kind of box office. They have a lot of really good players, but they've also got that vulnerability at the back that at the moment is still there. And maybe with the taking time for the partnership to gel, that was the first time they both started together. So that's just something to maybe keep an eye on.
Arsenal then, I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but I suppose that's what the viewers would probably want us to mention. I understand people's expectations were low, but I wasn't quite expecting the first 3 games, to be honest with you. I've loved the process. I've trusted the process with Mikel Arteta, and I know directly after losing to Villarreal in the Europa League semi-final, we were kind of leaning towards Arteta's time to go. But it seems that the board have, Arsenal spent the most money in the window, which is amazing considering United have signed Varane, Sancho, and Ronaldo. Yeah, Arsenal have signed the most money or spent the most money. So, is there any case to trust Mikel Arteta in a season where Arsenal could realistically finish, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th in that mid-table range? Is there a point in sacking him if you're not going to get an Antonio Conte? If it's maybe the next level down, because a Graham Potter coming in isn't really going to change things overnight, really. So, what's the kind of thinking there with Mikel Arteta and your thoughts on it at the moment? If you can stomach a few words on.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think there's a whole lot of mess happening in and around the background with Arsenal. I think when you're like that where you are, I do think you generally have to sign a load of rubbish players to get back to where they were. You think of some of the players that there's probably Liverpool where they were 10 years ago. You think of some of the signings, the players they had, your Akolanis, your Varland, these types of players. Paul Konchesky's, you do go through those spells. The worrying thing with Arsenal is they backed the manager in the summer. They weren't brave enough probably to sack him. I maintain that if there was fans in the stadium and Arsenal, or if there was fans in the stadium last year, Arteta would have been gone, and this summer would have been a lot easier for them. To get behind a new manager with fresh ideas. I just don't know who's going to take the Arsenal job. I don't think anyone would go near it unless they're, I don't think any proven manager would go near it. Then you're probably looking at unproven managers at big, the big club at a high profile job. So it's a difficult moment for Arsenal, difficult moment for Arteta. Sometimes you can weather the storm, but I just think this is a tsunami like what's coming down. Even saw the stuff today with Maitland-Niles.
Yeah, well, that's obviously not good. But like on Arteta, Sean, like why is it going so wrong? Like, what is he? Like he was able to play that back 5 in the big games to start with, but he seemed to have no idea in City once the goals started raising in.
I think for Arteta, there's probably bigger problems than he first could have ever imagined. And one of the things that he had going for him is he was working with players that he didn't sign, and he was improving them. I think the problem is the players that he wanted, the players that he brought in, the likes of Willian, they just haven't worked, and you're judged. I heard a quote a while ago. Managers are judged on results and their signings, because if you're an owner, you're not letting the manager slow money. I think a prime example of that is probably Chris Wilder at Sheffield United, and probably one of the main reasons the breakdown broke in communication between the owner, Sheffield United, and Chris Wilder, and the fact that they wasted money on McBurney's and gave Jack Rodwell a contract and Ryan Brewster. And I think ultimately Arteta at the moment, his performances aren't good enough and the signings just clearly haven't worked. So it's not a good duo. So he's under immense pressure. I think he'll weather it out for a little bit, but it's up to him to get a tune out of the players, and it's up to the players to deliver, because it could be a very, very long season, and it's not even September yet.
And last thing on Arsenal, the Arsenal fans were chanting AFTV, get out of our club. Obviously now as a former, I only realised as I started asking that question, as a former AFTV star yourself, we have to realise the bias you might come up with your answer. But Is there any case that does have an effect on the players, because we're all living in a social media age? Granit Xhaka's seen it, who's terrible on Saturday now, by the way, but in general, like, the players do see it, these player ratings that Troops does and all this jazz. Definitely doesn't help. And I know every club has it, but for some reason the AFTV is the most popular by far. So it's probably not helping things, but like, at the end of the day, they're proper fans who pay their money. They're fully entitled to their opinion, I guess.
Yeah, that whole concept is weird. I think there's been fanzines and fan magazines and fan forums for years. I think the thing with AFTV is the reach is just being exasperated by social media and by, I suppose, Arsenal's performances and some of the results. I think what you hear on it, fan cams on different fan channels is just an extension of what you hear in the stadium. So if you're in Croke Park, even if you're in Dalymount Park or you're in the Emirates, fans can tend to be, and I am myself as a fan of many sports. You can be very reactionary and you can be, probably in that moment over the top or too emotional. And I think that's the fan cams or people's opinions are just an extension of that. And, I'd be honest, I think if you pay a lot of money to go down, get up at 6 a.m. to drive to Manchester and watch Arsenal lose 5-0, I think you're entitled, and spend all that money. I think you're entitled to have that strong an opinion. But there is elements to the Arsenal Fan TV at the moment that has probably changed in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly. So, fans are entitled to their opinion. What you hear on fan cams or on the Arsenal Fan TV channel is an extension of the rumblings that you'd hear if you were watching a game. The same kind of abuse, except it's captured on YouTube. It's there for the player to see. It's there for everyone to see. You can bet if, just thinking off the top of your head, when Gerrard slipped, against Chelsea, you can be sure that there was fans effing and blinding them that game. That moment there was disappointment in the air, but there's no legacy of it because there was no YouTube camera outside, taking the fans' reaction really. So I think that's what it is, and rightly or wrongly, that's how it operates, or that's how it's kind of deals with those things, and that's what it leaves you with. But it's not a positive thing at the moment, what's happening with the fans and Arsenal Fan TV, and it's probably perfectly captures where Arsenal are as a football club with their fan base. There's no connection to the players. There's no connection with fans in the boardroom, and a way of venting. A lot of fans feel a way of venting is to sing against Arsenal Fan TV because they see it as a medium for a way to slag Arsenal, or a way of making a mockery of Arsenal. That I think is what I get from it.
Yeah, I think I take from that is, look, it's not ideal, and you probably made some good points there, but it is unfortunately here to stay. And again, if fans pay their money, they are fully entitled to vent, and it's up to the market to decide whether they want to watch it or not. But it seems a lot of people do watch it. Onto the GA. Okay, it'd be one nice short review tonight. Kerry versus Tyrone. I'm going to be very honest with you, Sean. Now, I did not see this coming for 1 second, and even during the game was thinking that Kerry would find a way to win based on the forwards they had. But I guess hammer the hammer, and on this occasion the hammer might not have been David Clifford before the game, but Paddy Clifford, and Conor Murray did a tremendous job marking him. Tyrone seemed to just play a simple defensive system, unless I'm missing something, Sean, where they would force Kerry down either the left wing or the right wing and would just surround them with so many Tyrone players, and it just start laying a hand on them. And in fairness, now the Sean Cavan and Pat Spillane stuff was very OTT, but I thought Sean Cavanagh's best line of the day was like, God forbid Kerry would come up to Croke Park and Tyrone would lay a hand on them. But it was as simple as that. Like, Tyrone would just get in their faces, the intensity of the tackle, and Kerry didn't seem to have an answer or weren't ready for it, in the sense that when they went down these blind alleys, a Stephen O'Brien would run into contact, as opposed to, right, we're in massive trouble here, let's go back out, start again, keep the ball. And we were lamenting during the Dublin game about Dublin over keeping the ball, but I think there was a time in that game for Kerry, particularly in the middle of the second half, to just keep the ball for a minute or two and try and tire Tyrone down or wear them down. They just didn't seem to be ready for the battle at all. And again, it seemed, it's hard to not compare 2003 with that swarm defending, but it was very methodical the way the Tyrone lads did it. They rode their luck, I think, with the goals, but I guess you earned their luck. And Kerry's goal chances, they were good goal chances, but it was not like they had like hundreds and hundreds of them. There were two really clear goal chances. But yeah, I'd say massive fair play to Brian Dewar and Fergal Logan for coming up with a defensive system that worked. But you've got to look at Kerry and say, how are they not ready for this? You know, leaving aside the COVID thing, which we might touch on briefly towards the end.
Yeah, it was an ambush, and I think a lot of people, having been down in Kerry a couple of weeks ago, felt this was coming with the delay and with their relationship with each other. I think if you're Kerry, it does feel like, you know, there's been a lot of interesting articles out there at the minute, but I don't think you can really excuse what's happened between the players, the management staff. For it to be caught on the hop, if you like, 2 years in succession, and I really thought it was different this year after the Cork loss. I felt sometimes as teams in sport or whatever, and in different I suppose competitions, that a team just gets a little nudge and a little reminder and a little wake up call. And I thought last year for that was a shoe-in, and then that Kerry would come back a little bit more hungry, a little bit more street smart, a little bit more prepared, and they just they got caught again. Really, it just shows that they don't have necessarily the depth that potentially Mayo have in certain areas of the pitch. I'm thinking really in the wing back role or in the full back role. I just don't think at the moment they've brought in a load of great forwards over the last 2 or 3 years, and O'Shea and Clifford's, the two Cliffords, Darren Moynihan, who actually I don't think had a great game, but the defenders, bar a couple, haven't necessarily, taken the world by storm. I think that stat down about Kerry defenders with all-stars. Thomas Sullivan had a really good championship a couple of years ago. We necessarily haven't seen the best of him. People like Paul Murphy have been around a while. I just feel at the moment that is a massive concern for me. They don't have a wing back that you would worry about. I think with Mayo, or a defender even, you'd worry about. In the first 34 minutes of that All-Ireland semi-final, the Tyrone full back line, the three defenders who started in the full back line had all scored in the first 34 minutes, when Tyrone had only, 7, I think it was 9 scores they had at that stage. 3 came from their full back line. That's just phenomenal. And I think with Kerry, that's the one area you wouldn't necessarily worry about any of their backs coming up and having a day like a Paddy Durkin might, or a Lee Keegan might, or James McCarthy a few years ago when he played there, or a Jack McCaffrey when he played there for Dublin. And that's a worry for me. I think in the modern game, when you have people like Ryan McHugh and guys like this who play in and around that position of the pitch that really cause teams problems, Kerry just don't have that at the moment. And I think that's a massive asset to have, a big trump card to have, and that would really worry me. And I also don't think their defending one-on-one is necessarily good enough. I think there was a lot of handy scores for Tyrone where, Kerry defenders were a yard or two off. The 3 goals, a couple of them are particularly soft with how easy, the first goal comes, Clifford gives the ball away, a turnover, and Tyrone just swarm on Kerry, and Kerry just looked like they'd no plan. It was as almost if it was, let's just roll the dice and see what happens. There was no kind of tactical foul or someone engaging with the ball or hitting someone a shoulder. It was just Tyrone walked through them, a couple of clever passes. I think Peter Hart was involved, and McKenna sticks it in the back of the goal, in the back of the net. The third goal is very soft. The second goal is probably as soft. So that's a massive worry for Kerry going forward. And maybe we should have read the warning signs when Peter King kind of chose to play a little bit more defensive against Cork. That time maybe he thought, even with Cork forwards, that they could really hurt Kerry. And I think the warning signs have been there, and we probably should have read them, and that Kerry's defence just couldn't hold up. And coming out of the Dublin Mayo game, I felt as if Dublin wouldn't have beaten Kerry because I didn't think they could outscore them. I think it would have been a very interesting game now to watch both those sides play, because Dublin at the moment necessarily don't have the most potent of attacks. Kerry don't have a solid defence. How would that match up? So full credit to Tyrone, who took their opportunity, and goals win championship matches. They have for as long as I can remember. You can remember some of the great goals, the Kevin McMenamin goal, the Bernard Brogan goal, when he flicks it over, or when Henry drops the Donaghy goal when Kerry beat Donegal in 2014. There's a habit of All Ireland finals or semi-finals coming up with a massive goal that changes games, and Tyrone got 3 of them, and that in 100 minutes is a good return. So that worry will still be there with Kerry's defence in 2 or 3 years, unless they massively address something, or they find a way of dealing with that. But that lack of, I suppose, bite in their defence, and their lack of ability to join the attacks and get forward and have someone there that you would worry about, because for a few years Dublin and other teams, teams against Dublin have put someone on Jack McCaffrey, or they might have just kept an eye on him. And similarly with Paddy Durkin in the last few years, there was those battles where, Philly McMahon would, be marking someone, and all of a sudden he get 2 or 3 points from it. And I just think with Kerry, there's none of those backs you'd be worried about, or you think you're gonna have a massively tough game, and that's probably where they are.
Yeah, hard to really disagree with what you said. The All-Star stat is Kerry have had one All-Star defender in 5 years, and that was Tom Sullivan in 2019. So that just shows you that, the David Cliffords of this world, the Sean O'Shea's, they need that Mayo halfback and fullback. Looking ahead to the final, I guess, with Mayo Tyrone, because I know a lot of Tyrone fans are saying a lot of the talk after the game was about Kerry and Kerry losing it, and we spent a few minutes talking about Kerry losing and stuff. So on the Tyrone side of things, I suppose, Sean, I'm really focused on Tyrone against Mayo. I think a trump card for them could be, an obvious thing to say here, but Cathal McShane. And I thought the fact that the game went to extra time meant Cathal McShane had that chance against tired defence. It's got the confidence back. I thought his score when he was kind of like twisting and turning and hitting over the bar was just so rootless. And he could be a bit of a trump card that I probably wasn't thinking too much when I was asked earlier about who I think would win. And I think Mayo would be a lot more up for the physical battle. So like if Tyrone played the same way they did against Kerry, I think Mayo would be ready for that. So I think someone like a Cathal McShane could be the match winner for Tyrone here. And it'll be interesting who Mayo decide to, if they put Pork or Horror on him, if Cathal McShane does start. But I'd be fairly sure he would, because it's not like I'm usually a big believer in leaving something in reserve, but I think on this occasion, I think Cathal McShane's too good at football, and the fact he's got those minutes, those bonus 20 minutes in his legs 2 weeks to the final, I think it's a perfect lead up to leave him on the bench until 30 minutes before Tyrone and then put him in as number 23 or something. I think that's what they'll do. So on Cathal McShane, I think he could be a massive difference. And yeah, and there's Conor McKenna as well. They're both like ex-AFL lads, and just looking at the size of even Cathal McShane in the background here on our YouTube live stream, you can see the physique, and those two players will be ready for any sort of Mayo physicality from their defenders as well. So on Cathal McShane, do you reckon he will start? And am I kind of right in saying that is a bit of a trump card and a bit of a wild card that maybe people don't appreciate much now, because as I said, he hasn't started any of the championship games this year since his injury?
Yeah, just before that, I think with Tyrone, for a number of years, they necessarily, when they got to a couple of All-Ireland finals, and always were probably, the best team in Ulster the last 5 or 6 years. Since Sean Kavanagh, they necessarily haven't had a marquee forward or someone that you think, was an all-star until a couple of years ago when McShane came along. And he really was 2 or 3 summers ago where he was, outstanding, one of the top scorers in the championship. And, there was all that talk of him going to Australia or whatever. And I think Tyrone's success, even in the Mickey Hart era, has been built on a lot of unassuming players and a lot of really high quality players without grabbing the headlines. So you think of people like Conor Gormley, Brian Dewar, back in the day for Tyrone, McGuigan. So you look now and you could list off a lot of those names now: Sludden, Matty Donnelly, McGeary, who obviously got man of the match. But now what you have in that Tyrone team is you've got a couple of really marquee forwards in McKenna and McShane, and all of a sudden they just pose that little bit more problems where your Sluddens and your Donnellys are picking up a couple of points a game. These two, and it was testament with their goals. They scored 3 between them. They've just got that added potency. And with McKenna, I saw him last year in the championship, and I thought he was, at times one of the outstanding player in the championship, particularly, in the league and the championship. I really thought he last year in COVID, watching him kind of almost for the first time with an added look at him coming back for Australia really impressed me. And obviously Cavan came through Ulster at the end of the day, but having obviously getting the end of the league and the championship, I really enjoyed watching him. I thought he was an added dimension as an inside forward, really, and what role Tyrone played him in, because obviously it was Mickey Hart. It wasn't as, I suppose, as energetic as it is now. But now watching him this year, and particularly last weekend, he's just got that added hunger. I think he's got a little bit more what I call GA fitness. He looks more match ready. And I suppose on performances like he put in on the weekend, and guys like this, I think it just shows you how good some of the conditioning is, particularly in Tyrone. Tyrone and Mayo at the moment, they just look a cut above everyone. The tenacity in the Mayo team, they were last a couple of weekends ago, was absolutely frightening. And I'd liken it to the Tyrone tenacity. The Kerry looked dead in their feet, with about 5 minutes to go in normal time, but in extra time, particularly, Kerry were dropping like flies. You look at it when that third goal goes in, all the Kerry heads drop. Where Tyrone, I think a testament to that was when McKenna gets a second goal and the camera pans to him and he's jogging with a limp to get ready for the kick for the kick out straight away. And the hits they were putting in on Tyrone, the pressure they got on the ball when Tommy Walsh takes that shot right at the end of the game, there's someone on his boot pressurising them. They never were able to get a free score. Whereas Tyrone, when they went forward in the large parts of the game that I saw, they just felt like they had so much time to put the ball over and to take their score. And Tyrone looked like a team that, how they closed out that game looked like a team that had won 4 or 5 All-Irelands and were just confident in everything they were doing. And in your first year for Lohan and Dooher, it's frightening the job they've done. I think it really can't be underestimated or can't be lost. And I think it might slightly be lost, the job they've done to come through Ulster, to beat Kerry, might be lost on the fact that there was the delay and the uncertainty around COVID, if you like. But what they've done and how they've got this team playing and the conditioning those Tyrone lads are in is just a different breed. Tyrone and Mayo look by far and away the two strongest and fittest teams in the country, and Dublin this year looked a shadow of their former self, and Tyrone and Mayo just look 10 times what they have been, and they've got that physicality, and I think it's going to be a brilliant final in a couple of weeks' time, and I think it's really, hopefully, touch wood, going to be a ferocious game with plenty of hits and a real opportunity for both counties to get an All-Ireland, and probably one at the start of the year they weren't expecting, and that's the beauty of knockout football, straight knockout football. It does give you these moments, and it just, I suppose, similar to the Champions League, you just get on a run or you just find a way knowing that every game, and I think that's probably what suits Mayo, every game is a knockout game, and every game you have to go to the well and there's no holding it back. And I think with Mayo and Tyrone, we've seen that, and having watched both games back, having seen both the semi-finals, you look at both games going to extra time, of course. Mayo and Tyrone came good in extra time and in the last 10 or 15 minutes of each normal time. So that is mainly down to conditioning. And don't forget, the difficulties Tyrone have had, and particularly I'd imagine training in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it's an incredible job done by the Tyrone management team, as well as the whoever the S&C coaches are or whatever. It's really outstanding coaching.
Well, yeah, I'd agree with you, and I think the All-Ireland final, like you said, is going to be such a a physical battle, and obviously it's well documented the work the SNC has done in Mayo in terms of how they've always been able to match Dublin physically. But I know Tyrone have a great sporting centre there, and there's been a lot of work done on underage, obviously, to get the type of physicality in, and even the two players like Colin McShane and like Conor McKenna going to Australia has definitely helped that as well. Them just coming back in and having those options, but. Yeah, Sean, like there's a lot of good matchups with that. It's going to be a fascinating game. I think there'll be a lot more chances to talk about it, but I think to kind of sum up the game, it's that physical battle and those last few minutes. It almost feels unfair if the game doesn't go to extra time, considering they both had extra time winners. So let's have an extra time 90-minute All-Ireland final maybe. Wrapping up just the rest of the sport, like I thought it'd be amiss of us not to mention the Camogie semi-finals and kind of looking at it, like the Kilkenny, Galway, Cork have been the all winners, I think, since 2012 at Wexford. And it's only the Camogie finals that are played in Croke Park, but because this year Croke Park was free, they decided to put the double header in the Camogie semi-finals in Croke Park, which was great, which is something that I genuinely hope is continued, mainly because like you take Tipperary, for example, who've been very close to reaching the Camogie final the last couple of years. Their last game in Croke Park, at least championship game, as far as I'm aware, is 2006. So to give this Tipperary team an exposure to Croke Park, I think will help them down the line and to make Camogie a little bit more competitive in terms of getting other side counties. So disappointed in the sense that it's taken to a pandemic and a few other bounces of the ball for Croke Park to be available for Camogie All-Ireland semi-finals. But look, it's something that's a positive. And I know we always lament the overuse of Croke Park in normal times for GA, but I think in Camogie, the fact that the more exposure they get to it, the better. And it just makes for better quality games. It makes for a better watch. And also a small thing, they used to, for some reason, show the wrong angle for Nicky Rackard Cup finals and Lloyd Mara Cup finals and Camogie semi-finals and finals. And they've switched that back. And I don't know what's happened there, but I think that's so important because Croke Park looks like so different. I don't know what the crack is there, to be honest with you. I think it's because there's more fans in the Hogan stand, if you can interrupt, if you know the reason exactly. But anyway, they've sorted that as far as I can see. So there's positives there as well. And obviously Jason Smith winning by 0.01, second in the Paralympics. Amazing. His fourth 100-meter gold medal, his second. He's won two 200-meter gold medals and just phenomenal achievement. Paris is 3 years away. Should be very proud of Jason Smith as well. So there, and anything else in the sport weekend for you, or if you want to comment on those couple of stories?
Yeah, no, I've been kind of in and out of the Paralympic coverage, but it's brilliant. I actually saw the race. I saw it on Twitter that it was Jason Smith was going to be on, and I saw the Arona being raised for him. I thought that was brilliant. We've got the international break coming with Ireland, a couple of games in the Aviva. I've actually got tickets to go to the Serbia game, so I'm looking forward to that. And a special, just I think coming up the big few weeks of sport, we've got the Solheim Cup this week, or this weekend, I think it is, when Leona Maguire is going to be involved for Team Europe, first Irish woman to do so. And then in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have the Ryder Cup, where I think it's highly likely that we'll have two Irishmen on the team and one as captain. So there's a lot to look forward to in different sports. So it's always this time of year. I always think is mad with sport. Late August, early September, All Ireland finals tend to be in and around this time. Obviously, historically. But the start of the Premier League season, you've got the Ryder Cup, you've got the FedEx Cup in golf. Everything just seems to be winding up to a couple of weeks' time. So the international break is a nice break, and hopefully now Ireland get a couple of positive results as well as that. But a lot going on in Irish sport.
Yeah, tough game coming up against Portugal, and then we've the Azerbaijan game at the weekend, and then we've Serbia. So our regular pod around the Thursday might be mainly focused on the Irish coverage. I think that'll be a good opportunity to look at the first game, and then obviously Azerbaijan and Serbia are the two winnable games. But I don't know, Sean, I'm getting a small bit of Mikel Arteta vibes off Stephen Kenny. I was only saying to someone today, so I just hope I'm completely off the chart with that, but I am getting those vibes that if we stick with him for maybe 20 years, it might work, but I don't know in the short term. But look, I'm losing hope, I think, in the processes. I think are slowly coming around to the Martin O'Neill's, get me results ASAP. But look, I just lost the head for these long-term projects and all that. They're great on paper, I think. But look, we'll discuss that a lot more. We'll get some good coverage on that for the Ireland games.
You need Roy Keane back after that interview.
I have to say, and that was amazing, wasn't it, Roy Keane? And he comes across as such I'd hire him, I think. But again, that's me getting lost in an hour.
Yeah, no, it was a weird interview with Roy Keane. He just this feels like there's a lot going on in that mind of his, and that it feels like he's got the power to change the world, but he's just too kind of stubborn or too not arsed to do it.
Yeah.
But I imagine in the next 10 years he'll be Ireland manager, and I think him and Robbie are probably the two candidates that are going to be battling out for whenever Stephen Kenny era comes to an end, which I don't think it will for a couple of years. But I think it'd be Robbie and him, unless someone like John O'Shea, who's doing very well with his coaching, or Lee Carsey, who's England under-21 coach, does well. But I just see Roy Keane doing a hatchet job in a few years and getting Irish football back. But I did enjoy that interview.
Yeah, you can either do a podcast on the Roy Keane interview, and even as you were talking there, you could do a podcast on the likes of Lee Carsley getting lost to Irish football over the years. But anyway, at Tackling Sport and social media, keep an eye. We'll have the update on when the time of that Thursday podcast will be. Focused on the Ireland team, and they're usually quite good. They're some of my favourite podcasts to do. We do is our Ireland coverage. I really think we do get really into the grit of it, and try and keep the hopes alive as best we can, or stay positive, despite a lot of the negativity you'll see on Twitter about it. But yeah, at Tackling Sports social media, get us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. I think you can follow us now on Apple. I think not subscribe. They're moving away from that. It's all follow. So we'd really appreciate the follow and all the support from the podcast as well. But all that left to say is goodbye from Sean.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from myself. We'll chat to Thursday. Best of luck to Ireland. I think it's on Wednesday, isn't it, Sean? So, and all the best. Take it easy.